Hello and welcome to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast. Our podcast features interviews and discussions on all issues relating to quality early learning and care, with a range of speakers who are leaders in the areas that matter to Early Childhood Ireland members. I'm Maura Corbett and I work with Early Childhood Ireland. And you're most welcome to this, the second last episode for 2021. And we're going to talk in this episode about valuing staff. We wanted to reflect a bit on the strange and surreal 22 months we've all experienced. There's been a constantly changing situation with COVID-19, with settings closing for lockdown, some settings reopening in June. And the start of this year, ECC settings were closed, and it brought so much uncertainty for managers, educators, the connections to families disrupted. Educators and settings trying to respond to the needs of children and families, keeping children reassured, keeping connections going. And that uncertainty is still continuing today, as we know. But the constant through all of this, I think, has been the commitment and the dedication of staff in settings. Everyone in settings, educators, managers, cleaners, admin staff, caretakers, cooks, they've just played the proverbial blinder to ensure that settings were nurturing, safe and welcoming even when they were closed, making sure that children and their families felt that sense of warmth and care even when they were apart. So as we get close to the end of another year that, like I say, can only be described as bizarre and still with much uncertainty, we decided to look at, I suppose, how this contribution by all staff in settings to ensure the health and welfare of the children across physical, emotional domains can be recognised and acknowledged. So I'm delighted to be joined for a chat by my colleague from Early Childhood Ireland, Gillian Moore. Gillian works with us and is responsible for providing a specialist HR advice service to members and supporting line management with the HR needs of employees within their settings. And she has a keen interest in employee development and management. So Gillian, you're really welcome to this episode.
Thank you so much, Maura. Thank you for inviting me back.
So Gillian, you've done the whole working from home and homeschooling bit as well. So you've first-hand experience of a lot of those challenges. What are your thoughts on the past 22 months?
Well, and I think as a parent, and I speak for myself and a lot of my, my mummy friends and daddy friends, we really realized the value of the educators across settings, across schools. There's nothing like having an insight to what somebody does day in, day out, than having to do it yourself. And that's with no training, So I was lucky in that my children are slightly older. They're 6 and 8. And I'm also lucky that they had both, they had, obviously done their ECCE, but they had both been in settings because I worked full time. So they were both they're quite independent in their play and their learning. And, and I could really see how lucky I was that they were able to almost occupy themselves, while I was trying to work. And they were so creative and thinking, will we do this now? Or, why don't we try that? And I was thinking, that's where they got that. They didn't get that from me. I'm not a creative person, particularly, I'm in HR, I'm very, analytical. So I'm like, where did this creativity come? And I was like, this came from being with these amazing educators before this all happened. That they're able to think, to fill their day with play and joy. And, of course, there's the odd iPad when I'm doing a meeting or, a bit of TV, and we all did that and wished we didn't have to. So that's what I really reflected on. And from conversations I've had, people were, and when settings reopened, I think we all realized how important they are, we didn't necessarily get the designation of frontline workers, but they really, really were in the front lines, giving that continuity back to children, giving them that socialization. So much as mine were well able to play and do all of that, they really missed their friends. They really missed being with other children and being in those amazing environments. So to get them back to that was so important. And I think a real positive out of all of this is people really, really realize, parents and guardians really realize how it's so much more than childcare, how important it is, how much it was missed. You miss something when it's taken away, and it's taken away so abruptly. So I like to see it as a positive. And I think to it, we need to acknowledge what leadership our sector brought. They were innovative, they were
Big time.
creative, how they got, how they included parents, how they included activities, that maybe previously were face to face. They were able to do these in different ways. We did, Zooms with, children's in settings and Zooms graduations and all of that. But when they were back in the settings, they really thought of different ways and getting children outdoors and, you know, things possibly they'd have loved to have done, but maybe were reluctant to try, or and threw caution to the wind and did it. And um, I can only compliment them, and that's even too small a word. It's huge what happened,
Yeah.
um,
I
and
think the
I'm definitely grateful.
innovation,
Yeah.
yeah, I think the innovation and creativity that a lot of settings showed at a time when, there was a lot of, I suppose we've got more used to that kind of background anxiety now, but,
Hmm.
thinking back to those early days in 2020 and the early, when ECC was closed at the early part of this year, there was huge creativity and innovation shown around that keeping connected bit. We featured some on our website and on our blogs, and I think it's important, like you say, complimenting people kind of isn't is too small a word
Yeah.
in ways. Um, so, what are your thoughts on how managers can acknowledge that effort and the impact that that can have for people, Gillian?
When we talk about valuing employees, obviously the elephant in the room is pay, and it's like, how do you reward employees when the funding isn't there and you don't have the money? So it would be remiss of me not to mention it. Pay is an issue, but the funding hopefully is coming in the budget. Was a nod towards that. But pay aside, there's loads of ways you can value employees. And when we think of all the learning that educators do in the various courses and degrees and stuff that they do, we often talk about the voice of the child. So you can take that learning and bring it forward. It's like the voice of the employee is huge. So before you start going, oh, I might do this or I might do that, I might, give them a voucher, if you really communicate and communicate well and find out what means the most to a staff member, you can really value them by listening and, finding out. So it could be that a slightly later start might be something that would really make a huge difference on their life, and you value them as an employee, and subject to be able to doing that within the confines of your setting and start times. And these are not easy things to do, but they're easy to think of. There might be a little bit of work in implementing them. You can really show value, going like, we really want you to be here, we really want to get the best out of you, we want to enjoy your work. And if it's causing you a lot of stress and anxiety to get here at a certain time, let's look at that. So it's working with employee, listening, being, flexible, work-life balance, also letting them have the voice in the work that they do. Again, all of these are within parameters and within boundaries, but it's, some of the best ideas are going to come from your staff. It doesn't all have to rest on your shoulders as a manager and a provider, so having those conversations, what can we do differently? What can we bring in? And that's what, the last 22 months really did show us. At times, yes, our providers showed huge leadership, but those who did it really, really well, they did it as a staff team. They said, like, how can we make this work? And that's the most innovative and creative ideas coming from a place of fear, which is a really hard place to be creative, came as staff teams. So valuing their impact, they know the ins and outs of their day and their job. They'll have the really good ideas, and that makes them engaged, that makes them value their work, so them having that
Yeah.
voice in their day to day. And this sounds really simple, but sometimes we just forget in the moment, or we don't have the time or whatever. But a word of thanks and acknowledgement and a kind word, if you see something and you think, I really like the way they handled that, or really like, that idea, it's no use to anyone in your head. Just say it out. You don't have to wait for support and supervision. You don't have to wait for annual appraisal. In the moment is the best time to give feedback. Oh, I love what you did there.
Mm.
And you can take it even further. If it's a good idea that could be implemented across the setting, even better. That really, but even those words. And, like parents, unfortunately, can't be in settings at the moment, and you can't have those by-the-by conversations that pick up. And so, all of that has been changed. But trying to think of some ways to acknowledge the staff and to bring the parents and guardians and children into that, because, to feel that value from everybody. And, again, as a parent, I know that parents want to know how to do this, so it could be, and I'm not talking about gift and, monetary things at all. So, there should be no expectation that parents bring a gift. Like,
Yeah.
that's a separate issue and it's up to them. But it could be something like, suggesting that parents do like a Christmas card, from the child, and they work on that together, or just giving parents ideas of ways that they could acknowledge, because, again, maybe aren't that creative, or, just haven't the time really to think of ideas and want to do something nice, they could do that. Other way,
Or
there could
even
be other,
simple things, I suppose, like,
yeah,
passing on compliments from parents that, don't
exactly,
keep
yeah,
it to yourself. If a parent
exactly,
says something lovely about Jane in the baby room, pass
yeah.
that on.
Yeah, because it means so much to Jane. It's so much
Mm.
more impactful. Um, and, maybe practical ways of acknowledging, particularly around this time of year. It's like, can I do anything, and again, non-monetary. And it could be something you could involve the parents in. I've seen this in other sectors, but it could be something like, we're going to close, on a half day on the last day before Christmas. Everybody still gets paid, and like, bring the parents into it though, so it's not oh my God, they're closing and I'm going to have to make arrangements. If you put it in such a positive way, saying, look, after the year we've all had and how hard these educators have worked, we're going to we're going to close so that we can celebrate them and say, have a nice half day, go off and do your Christmas shopping, whatever, and really, what parents are going to argue with that? It's just to say a little acknowledgement
If you
from
don't
everybody.
announce it the day before.
Exactly. So give them notice, explain your reasoning. That's not going to work for everybody. And again, these are my ideas, and people could be like, God, I couldn't do that. But your own setting, the parents and guardians you deal with, the community. So there'll be different things that suit for you. But again, shown innovation, shown creativity in all other aspects of that. So it's just taking that thinking and applying it and going, is there something here I could do? Um, and and name it as what you want it to be. It is to acknowledge and value your employees. So tell them straight out that's why you're doing it. Don't even think, oh, sure, they'll know, or assume. Say, I want you to know how much I value you. And even saying those words are so powerful. And that's
Especially if it's in front of other people as well,
exactly,
that,
yeah. So if you're
that it
naming
isn't
it,
just
and handle
one-to-one.
it right,
Yeah.
as you say, don't be all, by
Mm.
the way, it's happening tomorrow. Just say, look, this is why I'm doing this, and this is why it's so important. Nobody can argue with it then. They have notice. And they'll get behind you, because, we all know now, we should have known before, but if we didn't, we all know now how important this sector and these educators are to the lives of our children. So any acknowledgement is necessary and welcome.
And do you have a kind of, you've mentioned some already, but a kind of, I don't know, top 3 ways, are there things like encouraging self-care, watching breaks, mindfulness, any of those kinds of practical, simple enough ways that just takes a bit of thinking in advance to
Mhm.
implement them, that you would suggest as we head into what's in many ways the busiest month of the year?
So it is things like that, more like practical things. It's like, when you're scheduling, just looking at hours, making sure people are getting a break, making sure, you link in with everybody. Again, we're back to voice and communication, but it's that everybody's involved in that. How is this next month looking? What have we got scheduled? What are the hours looking like? Is that working for everybody? And a full discussion around that. You know, if you had, we spoke about this when we spoke the last time. If you do have a concern about somebody, or you think they have a lot going on, or they just don't see themselves, a quiet, private word, but just to go, are you okay? There's a lot going on. It's a busy time of year. Is there anything I can do? And it's back to that thing of, maybe it's a later start or something. Just giving them that space to say, well, actually, this is currently stressing me out, and you could have a practical solution, and they're just so caught up in it that they don't feel, you know that they can bring it to you. So, you go to them, and it could be a practical solution that you can all work on. And giving them that flexibility. And then I suppose as you start into the new year, it's looking at everything, looking at the work that you're doing, bringing the staff into that, to get them fully engaged. What are your plans for the year, and see what everyone can bring to the table. And then you're starting the year in a great footing, because it's like everybody's involved, everybody's excited. I was reading last night a few things as I was prepared to talk to you, and it was so that people want, there's sort of three needs, and it's they want interesting work, recognition for doing a good job, and being let in on things that are going on. So they're kind of, and I was like, actually, that says it better than I can. But those three things, so like, but giving people insight into making their work interesting, making it, enjoyable for them, acknowledging when they're doing a good job, and then just, you don't have to keep everything, people feel, well, I'm the manager, so I have to take sole responsibility and I have to keep this thing going. And then, letting people know, obviously there's confidentiality, but letting them know what's going on. And, again, they could help you as much as you can help them, because you have all this on your shoulder, huge responsibility, loads going on. They could say, actually, I could help with that, or what if we did this, and so it's
I think
mutually
that bit of
beneficial.
playing to people's strengths that were revealed
Exactly.
maybe
Yeah.
during the pandemic. So, when we were chatting the other day, we said, about maybe an end of year newsletter that you mightn't have done before.
Mhm.
But if you're not techie, maybe, if you can cover somebody in a room, but while they take 5 minutes to do it because they are, and that
Yeah.
can be a break for them and ease the stress of you getting the newsletter ready when it's not
Exactly.
your thing.
Yeah.
So, I think
And that
playing to
plays,
people's
that's
strengths.
the interesting work, because it's like, I'd actually love to do that. And then you never know what comes of those things, because then they could say that could be a piece of work that they do all the time that really, if they're quite techy and creative and everything, it satisfies that in them that they may not be getting when they're in the rooms with the children. And then, so it's, but it all comes back to talking to staff and really listening to what they're saying and getting to know them. You can only play to people's strengths when you know what they are and what they, so it's the communication piece, when you talk about valuing. So it's the listening and the acknowledging, that will really, you really should see a difference.
And I suppose there's a bit too, we've talked a bit in the last couple of minutes about what managers do for staff across all the roles in it, but there's also a bit of, minding yourself and who's minding you as a manager. And in community settings, you have the support, hopefully, of a good board of management or committee. But, taking the time to find your own ways of managing the stress of being a manager is an important bit too, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the piece of, not being afraid to ask for help. Like, it's not a weakness or anything. If we talk about it in the context of playing to people's strengths, and, people be more than happy if it's something they're able to do and they're interested in, so something that could be really taking loads of your time and stressing you out and taking you away from the reason you're there and the reason that you're a manager, the things that you're really, really good at. So why not ask, and I suppose that there probably is a piece there, you talk about the support of a board and everything. So we talk about acknowledging staff and everything. There is a role to play in boards in acknowledging the entirety of the staff, but in particular those managers, and that could be, I don't know, that could be an email, just, thanking the staff and acknowledging all their work to do. But, maybe a special note to say, our manager showed true leadership and kept us open, and, naming a few things that they did in particular. And that kind of acknowledgement, often the manager, might be the person who's not getting any of the love or the acknowledgement, so if you're in the position when you're in a board, you could do that, you should do it. And it's again, it does sound really simple, but it's say those words,
Yeah.
and say them in a timely way. Don't wait till the end of the year when everything's, forgotten. If something's happening, say it in the moment. And maybe that could be what people take into the new year is, I'm not going to wait for the appraisal or any of that. I'm going to start acknowledging people regularly.
And I think there's a bit about saying the words, it can sometimes, seeing it in writing is great and important, but sometimes hearing it it can seem more authentic in a funny way than seeing it written.
Particularly, you know, if you notice now, you say it in the moment, you go, I really like the way you did that, that warmth in your voice, that, you know, the kind of the not surprised, but you know, that kind of, wow, I really like that, you know, the kind of exclamation, you know, it resonates. Whereas, you know, if it's a week later and as you say an email, you know, what you did last Thursday was really, really good, it's kind of, you know, it deadens it a bit.
What did I do last Thursday?
Yeah, what are they talking, you know? And the thing is, it's harder in writing. It just formalizes things, because what you might be acknowledging is, it might, you know, it might seem like a very small thing. So when you go to write it, you're like, actually, so you may end up not doing it at all, because you're like, actually, now that I write that, it seems silly, but at the time, in the moment, it won't, you know. So it's sort of like a, you know, random act of kindness or something. You know, if you see someone and you like their coat, just say to them, even if they're strange, I love your coat, you know. And like, you're making someone's day. Like, how you make someone will feel will always be remembered. You know, they won't, you know, they mightn't remember the exact words. They definitely won't remember it from an email, but that feeling in the moment will stay with them.
Yeah. That's a good point to end. I think that's kind of Maya Angelou, I think, said that people won't remember what you said or what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. So I think, Gillian, that's a great point to end on. And it really can be the simple things sometimes. So thanks for sharing those ideas and reflections. And thank you for listening to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast. And we hope you'll join us the next time. Thanks, Gillian.
Thank you, Maura.